Welcome to another episode of Metaverse Studio, brought to you by Phygtl, an AR Web3 platform that lets brands create immersive experiences for their users, unlocking a new dimension. And without further ado, here comes our host, Tommaso Di Bartolo.
And good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are dialing in from. And welcome to another episode of a Metaverse Studio, where Web3 minds deconstruct value creation in the Metaverse. And I have an amazing lineup of panelists that I would like to introduce, starting with Andrea Abrams. Andrea is founder and chief Metaverse officer at Phygtl and chief of strategy at Phygtl. She's a fashion and retail industry veteran and global executives. What a pleasure, Andrea, to have you here.
Nice to see everyone. Pleasure to meet you, and nice to see some old friends back again.
The pleasure is all ours. And we have Adriana, is co-founder of the Fabricant, the Amsterdam digital-only fashion house, building the wardrobe of the Metaverse. For an Italian, super important, even being dressed very nicely in the Metaverse. Prior to the Fabricant, Adriana has held commercial positions up to the boardroom level in large global consumer brands in fashion and retail. Adriana, que prazer. What a pleasure to have you here.
Same here. Thanks so much for the invitation and for the pleasure to meet Andrea. Finally, we meet at the same place. Right. Kind of IRL, yes, URL.
I love that value creation finds already here in our podcast, right? And Elizabeth today that has joined me as a co-host. Elizabeth Irizarry, I hope I didn't butcher your family name, Elizabeth. Is the Chief Experience Officer at Mission Impact, a startup pioneering the future of leadership through emerging technologies. Elizabeth, what a pleasure. Thank you for joining me as a co-host.
The pleasure, it's all mine. This is a beautiful space to be with these two incredible women. I look forward to continuing to connect and exploring these conversations.
Elizabeth, what is it that we have today in our menu, on our agenda? What is it we are going to discuss? A couple of highlights before we kick off things.
Tommaso, so today we are going to dig into the role fashion plays in the metaverse and the importance of the Phygtl approach. And so there's a lot of common ground with these two beautiful women on here today. And so I'd love to continue to explore that deeper.
This is very intriguing. Why don't we kick off things? Adriana, fashion in the metaverse, right? We have seen over the last month, if not right now, a year, something over a year, right? A bunch of avatars and digital creatures and a bunch of also partnerships, right, from brands joining the metaverse. What is the subtle importance of why fashion in the metaverse in connection with the digital ID? What can you share here with our audience?
I love this question because actually the thesis of the Fabricant was built on it. And in 2018, when we started the Fabricant, we had this thesis that fashion is all about self-expression, right? That's why we wear things differently, because we have different identities. And why we want different identities? Because we want to connect. And when we look at our connections, look at this room right now, our connections are actually mostly now done virtually, not physically, right? So in that sense, our thesis was, well, if connections are done virtually, if our identities are done virtually more and more, why do we need fashion to be physical to exist? And we set ourselves the challenge to create a model of digital-only fashion. Actually, fashion that only exists for our digital wardrobes, that only exists for our digital existence. And back in 2018, most people didn't understand what we're talking about. The word metaverse wasn't there. NFTs were still very niche, right? And I look at like, oh my God, how much the world has changed in only 3 years. You could even say that 2020, the fashion industry started to wake up, and I guess, NFTs start to become more mainstream, but 2021 has been like a mega shift. And we're super happy because it makes our life and our mission much easier to implement right now, right? So that's our point of view, is actually fashion should be digital. What are you talking about?
Self-expression. Go ahead, Elizabeth, please.
No, I love that because I think we can expand on that. A lot of the conversations lately with the opportunities of leveraging the metaverse is that it could truly transform an industry that could be downfalling, right? Could be changing. And so some of the positives are there's just so many things you can do being digital that you can save an industry, whether it is in consumption of materials, you can test things out digitally before you create them physically. Can you expand a little bit on that, maybe Andrea, because I saw that you have this Phygtl approach and you're very focused on Phygtl. Can you expand a little bit on how we can leverage that to kind of change the industry's, view and perception in the market?
100%. I think everything you both ladies have said is very true. And I love that Adriana and I come from many, many years with brands and the industry, because I do think that much like with Web 1 and Web 2, you have to understand the business that you're disrupting, right? I'm a big believer. I got into the space through the blockchain side of things, understanding why blockchain could disrupt industries. And I believe that technologies should be used to solve a problem. There are some technologies that are used for entertainment, but if we're going to talk about a very structured industry like retail or fashion, we need to understand what happened with the adoption of Web 2, for example. So a lot of what Adriana talked about, and we were talking about this earlier today, it's close and dear to my heart, because the manufacturing of physical garments is not going away. Branding rules are always going to be very important, and I rely on the emotional communication with your consumer or community. I'd like to talk about community more than consumers. And so what digital fashion does is two things. I was asked a few months ago to talk in Davos about NFTs for fashion beyond the hype. And I said, well, there is no hype in NFTs for fashion. There's a new, limited view of what NFTs are. But if we're going to talk about NFTs as tokenization and as to what it means to build things digitally and on chain, we need to talk about all the things that digital fashion can do to improve some of the things that we've been trying to improve in the physical fashion world. Traceability, authentication, giving authentic creative credits to the creators, enabling creators, as Adriana was saying, to create their own label and make it accessible without a lot of the hierarchies that have plagued our industry. Testing of materials, digital sampling, avoiding waste, circularity, and most of all, inventory management, which it is not very organized today across all product types. When you look at the creative aspect of it, and I was discussing with Adriana that I have a lot in my personal life, a lot of fashion designers that are my friends, they're all fascinated by the tools that the Fabricant, for example, has, because it allows expanded creativity with things you can't test physically. And it allows you to have multiple identities. And I love to talk about metaverse identities because after 25 years in the fashion industry, there are a lot of things that physically I don't get to experiment with because of the realities of the physical body. And you get to a point where maybe there are parts of your identity in creativity that you want to reflect that are not possible physically. And with the Fabricant, I tell people we can have multiple representations of our identity, and it is a new vehicle for self-expression. So I don't like talking about digital or Phygtl just as digital twinning of physical items, because it's two different industries. And I love having people like Adriana advance that conversation. And I look forward to a future not too distant when physical designers work with Adriana for collaborations on what the different creative identities of our avatars and our physical bodies can be in a fashion collection.
Yeah, amazing.
That's very intriguing what you are, and a lot to unpack, Andrea. I was reflecting upon how far do you think, Adriana, are we actually away from the fact of us being in the metaverse, and the metaverse meaning having a community of like-minded peers, and the technology allows us to co-create composability, right? So taking one element or one digital asset and adding value to it, right? Even visual value or even utility value, and maybe then closing the loop if we talk about fashion, right? And bringing it back into the physical world, right? From basically from physical to digital, but then also from digital co-created back to physical. What are your creative thoughts there, or where do you see a kind of a trend, or do you have signals that you want to share here with our audience?
Yeah, 100%. Before I answer your question, I want to actually pick back on what Andrea said, because I think she's spot on. Why we are so passionate about digital fashion is because it can disrupt an industry, right? It's an industry that is highly toxic in many ways. It's toxic from a planet point of view, as we know, is quoted as the second or third most polluting industry in the world. Our consumption is much higher than our need to consume. It is humanly toxic. We all know about the supply chain issues that we face and how much unequal that supply chain is. And ultimately, it's an industry that is dictated by a few and copied by many, right? Where actually being a designer became selling and adapting what somebody else is putting out because that's marketable. And digital can turn this all upside down. And when I say digital, it is high quality 3D enabled by blockchain technology, right? And to me, when we talk about metaverse, there are a lot of misconceptions or concepts, let's put it this way, of metaverse. And I always say, back to the basics, is the metaverse for us is two big revolutions that will enable the fashion industry to be more sustainable, more human, and more creative. One is a new form of media. We all have been through the evolution of media on the internet. Web 0 and Web 1 was text, was very functional. Web 2 was pictures, and now much more videos, right? And we're just creating another media type, which is immersive media. It doesn't mean that video and pictures and text are going to disappear. It's just another way for us to explore ourselves into the digital medium, right? And the other big revolution is blockchain. And what blockchain enables, like Andrea was saying, is credit back to the creators, right? Is basically equalizing the power and giving that power and the credits back to the creators community, which of course in fashion is a creative media, is a creative industry. It makes a lot of sense. So when you ask me, when is it going to happen? It is already happening, right? We already have immersive technology for many years in the gaming space. It's just that right now this immersive technology is breaching out of what we call game and becoming a social media, it becoming a connection media, becoming a place where we can meet, a place that we can express. And blockchain is becoming more and more, of course, mainstream. So these two things are strengthening each other. And when you ask about when can we co-create and create composability and share the earns, it's happening now. Actually, that is the base of our product. We launched a platform called the Fabricant Studio because we wanted to make a new fashion industry that's co-created. And that is exactly what it does. We have a garment designer that places the garment. We have a graphic designer that brings the materials. And we have me, who is not a designer but loves fashion and can customize it. And I can mint my own item. It's an NFT, but the three parties involved share the royalties equally, right? And share the earns equally. And in that way, we are not only moving, as Andrea said, and I love that, from consumers, which I think is a Web 2 term, to communities or to participants or to co-creators, because when you enable everybody to participate, that is the new, to me, that's the new, I'm a marketeer, that's the new marketing, that's the new kind of brand love. Brand love used to be, we created this massive stuff and you like us and that's it. And we inspire you, but you consume, right? You fill up our pockets and we give you entertainment and inspiration. Well, Web3 is like, no, we inspire you, we enable you, we create with you, and you earn with us, right? Very, very different concept. I was in New York, and what the apes did, no brand in the world, in the day of today, does such an experience for a community. 3 days in the pier with entertainment, music, food, everything for the community, right? So the amount that these Web3 communities are giving back, both tangibly and untangibly, is phenomenal. And I think that's the only way to go. You know, I'm a big believer in DAOs. Andrea is also, we're talking about it backstage.
We're
Also,
building
big
one.
believer, you know, I'm like, let's just DAO it. Let's just, let's start building these new models, because to me it's about
This podcast is powered by Phygtl, with a special guest from Women of the Future. To Metaverse.
pioneering new models. You know, we are in the big scheme of things. We exist in 2018, and it's amazing that a fashion brand can exist for 4 years, right? But we are a small player in a huge industry. But we are here to show that new business models can be created, to show that new value models can be created, and enable through the platform for many more people to do it, right? So that is like, I guess, our big agenda that we're passionate about.
And if I may, Tommaso, there are a couple of things that Adriana said that I think are really, really important that I don't hear as often in some of the events and the conversations. And maybe it comes from having worked on the brand as you have, Adriana, for 4 years. But when we were talking earlier about first time I was introduced to the Fabricant and I heard about the work Adriana was doing. It was very early on. It was end of 18, beginning of 19. And it was introduced to me from somebody in the blockchain space, creating a blockchain for fashion. And as I was joining a team to launch a wearable NFT platform, which you can imagine in 2018, 2019 sounded like something really crazy. A multi-brand wearable NFT. And I can tell you, many people ask me, who's going to wear? Who is going to wear the wearable? Right, exactly. Where are these avatars? And I do a lot of international work, and there were people I was working with in Korea who already had their avatars and talked about metaverses. But it was very new for my fashion and retail community here. And there are a couple of things that Adriana touched on that I think are really important. One is the disruption from the DAO and being committed to sort of the principles of decentralization. So the work I do as chief of strategy for Faith Tribe, we're building a Web 2 platform that creates a lot of the tools that Adriana is describing, but also we're going to bring some of the physical tools that the brand, Faith Connection, that created Faith Tribe, has had the benefit of having. And we're doing this because there's this perception in fashion that, and probably true because it is a very hierarchical industry, that no matter how talented you are never going to easily get your product in front of a luxury brand in Paris or manufactured by the right people or sold on platforms like Farfetch unless you have a lot of money or a lot of access that comes from family, from historical access that's not based only on merit and talent. And, that's where decentralization begins. And, as we were looking at Web 2, we call it Web 2 into Web 3. Yes, we have a token, and yes, there will be a DAO that will be launched so that creators can submit their sketches and find the tools to create digital samples and be selected for production. Part of what is disruptive about what we're doing is saying we're going to disrupt the entire ecosystem. So the investors in the platform, people like me, can stake the token and be participants in empowering that talent, regardless of where they come from. But we decided we have to start with a Web 2 approach and involve digital creators like Adriana and people who are teaching the different tools. Because it's very easy to say, submit some sketches or submit some digital designs and we'll give you access to the traditional fashion and manufacturing industry, but it's all part of the same. We have to teach you how to do it. And if you're a designer from the physical world, you need to learn the tools and the craft of making digital samples from people like Adriana who have spent the time developing the craft, because it's all difficult and carefully considered. It's not just a quick sketch that's digital. In order for it to have value, it has to be properly done. So a lot of this is our commitment to bringing all of the quality education together to provide that access. And once it's fully decentralized, as Adriana was saying, it has to be truly decentralized and it has to be committed to this access. People ask me all the time, what is the key word for you today of what Web3 can do for your industry that others haven't done? And for me, it's very simple. It's access. And so why decentralized blockchain? It acts as a facilitator like never before. It erases a lot of the entry barriers. All transacting participants can have economic ownership of that ecosystem that is protected by the system. And the creators can incorporate smart IP rights. And that's huge because in fashion, in the physical world, as Adriana pointed out, that is also in the art world, it's very difficult to protect your IP when you're a starting artist and you don't have the tools, the legal support. All of that is enabled by Web3. So when my brand friends, CEOs of brands, the luxury brands say to me, after 20 plus years, why should I engage in this process? For me, it's very simple. It's because it is disruptive and it solves a lot of the problems. But like anything worth doing, it has to be done with quality. And it can't be them and us. And that's why we created Phygtl, because there was a lot of this them and us conversation. And the reality is that to achieve true adoption, we need to bring people from the physical world, manufacturing, design, buyers, influencers, and the digital world, both of equal talent, bring in their talent at an equal level. And this is why I love these conversations with people like Adriana, because I was saying earlier to Adriana that a lot of my designer friends would love to spend a week with her because they know that the people who really design for digital fashion are designing with the same process that they design in the physical world. And some of them resent that, there are those who create maybe a layer or a skin in a game and they think they're fashion designers. And that's a very different craft, because the fashion designer has to take a lot of things into consideration that you don't need to consider when you're creating a skin for a game that is very two-dimensional. So thank you for bringing us together, because it's really exciting to talk about these things with somebody that has truly pioneered the craft of digital fashion design. And I hope that when my fashion industry friends, both business and creative friends, hear this conversation, they'll be really inspired to see that when I say the Fabricant is doing all this wonderful work, they see it's for real and that they are committed to the craft from day one.
Oh, thank you so much. But yeah, I'm with you 100%. I think we spend, it's fair to say, like we spent the first 2 years of our existence educating people. I think we're still educating a lot, but we feel that right now, and when I say educating, is young designers, the fashion industry in general. But I see a shift right now. I see now a shift that is much more about enabling. They are coming more informed. They're more saying like, can you help me to be in this space in an authentic way? And we engage in the conversation, and we absolutely partner with brands still. I do feel that the last piece of mindset shift that is harder to get is when you touch IP and when you touch co-creation and you touch participation, right? Because it is like hitting the model at the core, right? And I think that is the last piece of understanding that I think, and I hope it stays, because as we know, Web 2 is in flux, Web 3 is in flux, they are converging, and being early in this space, the ethos of decentralization are very pure in the Web3 community. But I'm always thinking like, ooh, I hope they stay as pure, right? I hope they stay as pure, and I hope that we progress and we hold hands and we keep that decentralization ethos, what Andrea talked about, the access, the true like power back to the creator, that we keep that as core to the movement going forward, even if when it takes to mass adoption, right? So to me, like that piece of rethink your business model, start to rethink your business model, because the value of it, again, we can create a collection of 4,000 items by only opening it 10 to the community, right? So actually, the combined effect of co-creation is much higher than your single capability. And your fans are truly loyal because they have skin in the game. They not only buy into your mission, into your brand, but they actually buy into what you're building together, right? So I think that there are, like, when you think of the business model on a global level, there are a lot of benefits to move. I guess that's the next step that we need to educate and to prove together that is worth going that direction step by
I
step.
love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Andrea. Thank you so much, Adriana. I have a bunch of questions, but I'm looking at the time, and we could talk for hours about the co-creation innovation. I love how you put it. You said with the new brand love, I call it brand empathy, right? It's taking really with the metaverse into the next level, which is ownership and co-creation, right? And this leads to self-expression and then empowers basically the ones that nowadays have not had the possibilities, right, of on one hand participating and collaborating on creating something, right, and on the other hand also to monetize, own, and become a part of something rather than being sold something. Elizabeth, I push the ball in your court. You want to go with the second last question? What are your thoughts?
There's so much to unpack here. Like, there's lots of conversations. I mean, I listened to the creator economy is what I was hearing in the conversations. Like, we're entering this new wave of creator economy. And then I thought about equity in this space, because hearing you look at what happened with major brands now. I think they've been generating at close to 140 million in NFT sales alone, and as an industry. That's huge. What if that shifted towards closer to that creator economy and not these major brands? And how do we truly make it accessible? And you're saying education, which 100% is the same thing that we believe at the core is necessary. It's like you have to do the groundwork, not just education from the industry standpoint, as this fashion industry, but also education as it pertains to the emerging technologies. And so not dividing the two. So it's the same. It same goes for every industry, whether you're in architecture, design, or fashion. Same thing as in architecture. You're told that your work isn't going to make it. Not everyone's going to be, a Zaha Hadid, and so your work isn't going to be prominent. And same thing in the fashion world. Not everyone's going to be Gucci. Your work isn't going to make it to that. And so it's beautiful that the creators now feel this opportunity and that are coming forward. And I would love to see collaborations. I wonder, Andrea and Adriana, your perspective on that. Like, would you see more collaborations with like the creator economy to evolve kind of the future of fashion rather than the guidelines being set by major brands? Would that start to shift, how we defined prominent fashion, how we define trends?
I think so. I think collaboration, and you mentioned some statistics, Elizabeth, that let's be frank, the value creation financially came from brands that did it right, that did it with the proper advice. Tommaso talks about a lot of the rules for the metaverse in the book. I think, there are leaders in the industry that didn't just wake up one morning and say, this is how it works, because as we were saying earlier, you have to consider the rules of marketing. You have to consider the rules of creative product. You have to consider the rules of selling product in the real world. And so what is disruptive and very fascinating is the cross-pollination that's happening. Before, you couldn't, certain brands, and I've been working with brands for years, as on the brand side, on the investor side, on the landlord side. I spent a lot of my career advising luxury brands. Many of the brands you see on TV today with their metaverse projects, I used to advise someone how to go from physical to digital, and then it was from clicks to bricks for the digital brands, and then it was cross-border retail was the barriers. I remember being at MAPIC in Cannes a decade ago, and our title was Erasing the Barriers of Geography. Well, now we're erasing the barriers of technology. But the reality is that when you have a value proposition, good product, good brand, good community, and I think the NFT community projects have taught marketers and product makers a lot about what it takes to really create a good community, and marketing, what I like, the 70-20-10 rule, where the 70% information and the 20% emotional connection are really, really important. And the promotion is, sort of secondary. We learned that from some very young marketers that did it in a very instinctive way. So do I think there will be more collaborations? Yes, because the brands, that some of the ones that you referenced, if they're smart, they're watching how to connect with community. And they're going to learn, and that's why you see these collaborations, that the way to get into the community and create that emotional connection is not just physical, and it's not the traditional way of of the industry. You have to create new ways. So I was there with a powerful business, public company, when the threat in the retail business was this digital connection through e-commerce, right? Like I can buy something through e-commerce, it arrives in my home. I don't need the physical experience. Then the threat was social media. So how do you market through social media? And the idea of peer-to-peer validation. So I can be a strong brand and have brand value and tell you all these wonderful things about why you should be loyal to me, but your peers may tell you something else. So it forced the brands to create authenticity. We have now, as Adriana said earlier, sort of the greatest challenge of ultimate authenticity, because Web3 is exposing all of our identities, all of our conversations, and there's only so much money to go around. So if I divide the pie of consumption, how many dollars per consumer that's going to spend dollars on things other than the basics to live, any disposable income for every dollar that's going to expressing yourself in a virtual world, because that's a significant part of your day or what gives you satisfaction. If I'm a brand, I have to pay attention to that, because that dollar is now being spent on the physical product. And so I don't think it's just a question of expanding marketing or expanding brand connection. It's a reality. And I think the pandemic, let's be frank, Adriana and I have been doing this since 2018, and there were some concerns about speed of adoption. COVID made it it made it faster for everybody to discover that their self-expression had to be different. And it helped accelerate the idea of testing tools and testing new ways. Necessity does drive invention. So I do think that the smart brands will continue to create collaboration, and they're all studying why the apes, for example, I think Adriana gave the example, created a level of community and engagement that other brand activities are not creating. What I think we need to focus on as the leaders in the industry is, how do we do this responsibly? Because what we cannot do is fall in the same path of Web 2, for example, where some of the problems that we're still talking about were enabled by the technology. We could Photoshop image, we could create body issues. And I love having, three women in this conversation. We talk a lot about women empowerment with Mission Impact and all of the organizations that Adriana and I are part of. And yet, if you're in the fashion industry, you have to make sure that these beautiful tools don't lead us back to a time when the industry contributed to a more toxic lifestyle attitude, as Adriana was saying earlier. So I do think, for me, it's really important to have these conversations with other people in different aspects of the industry. And this is what we're going to expand with Phygtl, because we need to make sure that we use the tools appropriately and not enable problems. And Adriana, you're in the forefront of designing these beautiful garments for beautiful avatars. I think we in the physical industry of fashion look at leaders like you to make sure we don't fall through the same cracks of body image issues and all the things we're still talking about.
100%, and I think you spot on authenticity and I guess avoiding the mistakes. And like on the last one of the things that we deliberately do is different body shapes. Our avatars are never the standard model size, and we make it quite deliberately. And the authenticity, when you talk about collaboration, that's why a lot of fashion brands have collaborated to enter Web3, because one is still a niche population that has a very strong code of conduct. Not for nothing that Adidas in their first project did it together with G-Money, which is an influencer in the Web3 space, and together with Apes, because they felt this is a way to enter authentically. But once you enter, how do you keep your authenticity, right? How do you establish yourself in Web3? And it's interesting to observe that some of brands that came in quite strongly had a massive backlash, because no, we don't want discount on hoodies. Hang on, that's not what we're here for, right? You just made millions on me. That's not what we're here for. So following that conversation is really interesting. But we had the pleasure to collaborate with quite a few brands and in their journey, and we still do because we think it's important. We collaborate with Adidas, we collaborated with Vogue, with Buffalo London, just to name a few, and we think that, in my experience, there is a lot of true interest to build a new model, to learn, and I admire that because I come from the corporate world and I know how hard it is to swim counter stream, right? Which is Web3. And I think that there are a lot of leaders there that certainly have the right intent and want to create and drive these new business models. I do think that their biggest challenge, and being a bit like counter stream here, is not the fashion brands, is the fact that independent creators can create a label now. The fact that a Bored Ape Club is launching merch and they are worth $4 billion and they're only 2 years old and they have 30,000 consumers, right? In the old world, a brand can exist with 5,000 members, right? And right now, what these brands are already facing is the issue of paying influencers, TikTok influencers and Instagram influencers, which are becoming actually strong brands than the brands itself. Well, these influencers now actually only need a computer and design skills, and some of them do have, to launch the label. How interesting is that? So, one of the big, again, trends and shifts that I see happening is it's less about millions of eyeballs, it's about strong relationships, strong communities,
Wow.
back to, not consumers, but collaborators, co-owners, co-creators. And that is super disruptive. And that
Wow,
is
that's
what
the best segue, Adriana. This is the best, the like strong relationships, and you said also something super fundamental: new business model, and we are all here to learn, right? For those here in the audience that are listening, I hope that this a new episode with Andrea Abrams, that is founder, Chief Metaverse Officer. I always love this title, right? At Phygtl, right? And Adriana Hoppenbrouwer-Pereira, co-founder at Fabricant, and my co-host Elizabeth. I hope that you could here unpack, right, and give you some reflection on what are the opportunities, right? Look at the bright side of things, right? Get into the business, experiment, right? And I always like to wrap up things with a more visionary question for Adriana and Andrea, right? But it's a fire chat, so it's a quick response, right? So that we leave here this episode with some thoughts for our audience. Take me 10 years. I know it's a lot. And in Metaverse, it might be actually even more, right? But take me 10 years down the road, Andrea. Where do you see the industry going? And maybe you want to pack in this short answer also, what are the challenges, the bottlenecks that make actually this happen?
I think we won't be talking about Web3 anymore, probably be by Web5. I think we're already transitioning into more of extended realities that they're not in silos. So I think there's going to be interoperability for sure. And again, I look at Web1, Web2, and where we're in Web3. So I see interoperability. I see less participants. So from a technology perspective, is going to be a lot of consolidation. And it's going to be dominance by flexibility and interoperability and quality, like it was with Web 2 and Web 3. I think AI is going to be a very big part of the ecosystem, particularly for my industry and Adriana's manufacturing and distribution and consumption of fashion and retail in a phygital way. It's going to involve AI. And I do think that a lot of what we're doing with Phygtl, for example, is transitional and is to educate and show that there is this connectivity, but that's going to be over because in 10 years, we won't be talking, we'll be watching this and laughing and saying, do you remember when we talked about physical and digital? It's all going to be part of the same conversation. And it is going to involve all the extended realities we speak about today, on-chain activities, AI, and the things that Adriana and I can't even think about today because there are smart people today working on the next technology.
So Web 5, interoperability, consolidation, NEI. Adriana, what are maybe the challenges, the bottlenecks to get there? What are your thoughts?
Or can I add to the dream first?
Of course, yeah. Let's create the vision
I'd
first,
rather
right?
think about the dream and we figure out whatever the issues are.
Whatever bottleneck we need to solve at last.
Exactly. We figure out if the dream is good enough, we figure it out. But I love what Andrea was saying. I fully sign up to that. We're not going to be talking NFTs or blockchain. This is going to be just like we don't talk HTML, right? This is just going to be the way it is. And for me, our digital wardrobe is going to be bigger than our physical wardrobe. I give this analogy of, remember when we had CDs? Where are they now? That is my wardrobe.
Yourself now.
That's my wardrobe. Like, when I have all these meters free, oh my God, that's going to be heaven. So I think we're going to free loads of meters of wardrobes, because we're going to have digital wardrobes, and we're going to be changing our clothes, every second of the day. They are not going to be seen through our little phones on screens. They're just going to be augmented around our realities, and they're going to be beaming on us. And we're going to have mostly of our clothes are going to be super comfortable and thermal controlled. Physicality is going to be functional, and beauty and craziness is going to go digital. And I think we're also going to have different forms. We're going to have different forms of self-expression, which will be used in our digital medium. We're going to have, just like every single social media I participate, I have a different picture. I will have a different avatar. And those avatars will have different bodies, which will require different wardrobes and will be used in different situations. That's what I see.
Outstanding. What a great vision.
Beautifully said.
What a
Incredible
great vision.
insights. So, ladies, Andrea, Adriana, where do we find these digital avatars of you now today? Where do we find you online? How do we connect with you? We want the audience to be able to find and reach you.
Amazing.
So Phygtl is very simple. www.phygtl.io. We're going to be updating. You'll see a lot of new members from different walks of life, of digital technologies that are not just for fashion. And you're going to see a lot more work from us for the next activities in fashion beyond what we started with Metaverse for Good for the first Metaverse Fashion Week. So more collaboration with little-known brands to showcase the access that we talk about. And Faith Tribe, follow faithtribe.io. We're launching the platform very soon. And a lot of what we're going to be providing in terms of access for the creative community is a lot of what Adriana talks about, and we look forward to collaborating with Adriana. So follow both for what's next. It's just coming very soon.
Amazing. And for me, you can find us on the Fabricant.com and in any of the media channels. Myself, my passions are women in Web3. So hit me, anybody that's with women in Web3. That's my second passion. Like, girls, let's go. I'm always up to be in any kind of movement related to that. And of course, digital fashion. You can hit me on LinkedIn personally or Twitter, and I typically respond.
Likewise, and LinkedIn, please, I do answer myself. That's one platform I respond to myself. And like Adriana, we're in a lot of the same organizations. I'm actually speaking. If you're in New York City for New York Fashion Week, message me on LinkedIn. I'm participating in a women empowerment team called event on the 9th. And if you're a female anywhere in the world, like Adriana, I'm trying to provide a lot of the access in many geographies, and that's a lot of the mission. So it may take me a few days to get back to you, but we do get back to everyone reaching out, because we have to walk the walk, as Adriana said, and we are ourselves in our physical forms accessible as well.
Outstanding. And my fabulous co-host, Elizabeth, where can people bug you?
You can find me same place as LinkedIn, Mission Impact, missionimpact.world. Hover over, contact me, and I'll be available.
Outstanding. And we'll be making sure that we add here the information to the notes of this episode. And as always, I would like to thank you, Adriana, Andrea, and Elizabeth. What a pleasure. Humbly learning one conversation at a time and co-creating Web3. And as I always like to say, I'll meet you in the Metaverse. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for watching our podcast. Stay tuned on our social media network and see you in the Metaverse.